the 14th of July 2016. We have a couple of additional people today. We've got William Kapke and Josh Gavant, who have been helping out a lot in TSC realm. They're joining us as observers today. So thanks, folks, for hopping on with us.
Hey guys, try not to talk too much now that I actually can.
That's okay. You can talk. We have a lot of dead space in this meeting, and there's few of us who show up regularly. So all the help that you can offer is greatly received.
Thanks for having us.
Great. Okay. Sorry. So quick review of last meeting. We had we talked about the roll-up of active working groups. We're going to talk about this again this week and probably for a little while. We finally added Brian as an official member of the TSC. And I think, did we do this last meeting? And we talked.
Sorry, go ahead.
The level defining node core, which we're still talking about. Yeah, I think I'm copying and pasting a lot of wrong stuff. Okay, anyway, let's get into a stand-up and just talk about things that we did that are relevant to this meeting. While I get back into the Google Doc, I might let someone else go first. Who'd like to go start this off?
I'm happy to start. I put out the PR with the define Node.js core content. There was some interaction, and I pushed an update today to incorporate the comments so far. That's what I've done that's TSC related.
Alexis, are you with us today?
Yes. Well, I'll just say that I didn't have a chance to do much TSC related. Just been catching up with core and Windows issues. But fortunately, we have more resources now in our team to deal with Windows issues. So I'm hoping that I can spend a little bit of my time on TSC reviews going forward. Jeremiah?
Nothing of note for the TSC.
Nothing much on my end either. I've been swamped getting ready for Node Summit.
Okay, and I've obviously been a little bit slack as well last couple of weeks on my direct things that I've had to do, but I've been having some interesting conversations that they're probably a private business for now, but I'll fill you in a bit later. Anyone else? Josh or William, do you have anything to report that has been going on last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I was trying to think if I've got anything for this week. Something I can add to the agenda, which is we need. I could use a tutorial on how to set up YouTube to properly run a live stream.
I could maybe help that, but it's painful. Let me tell you that.
Are you talking about?
Okay.
Are you talking about going through a Hangouts on Air or doing it like I'm doing it from Uber Conference?
So I've been running a Hangouts on Air for the diagnostic stuff, and then copying the final video over to the Node Foundation account. But it seems like everybody else is live streaming from the Node Foundation account, which would be better. So
yeah.
Okay, that's something separate. We could probably just give you access.
Yeah, if you ask Michael Rogers, he'll give you access.
Yeah.
I have.
I have access.
Okay. I will add. It's taken me a long time to almost get a repeatable pattern where I can figure out how to do it.
Okay,
I
well,
did write up a
figure it out.
tutorial in the wiki, actually.
And also, Josh, if you want, I can step you through that. I do that for the inclusivity working group, and it seems to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I mean,
same here.
I meant like, see if we could write it down and make it repeatable. That probably would be cool.
Yeah.
Rod, does your guide include using the Node Foundation account? I don't think so.
It was written for the IOJS one, but it's basically the same.
Yeah, I know
Okay.
that part is easy. The part is actually getting it to, I don't know, maybe it's just the way I do it,
Right.
but for some reason it's not obvious how you switch in and have it be the Node.js user instead of you. Like,
Okay.
the
I can
first
leave
few
it at
times
that.
it took me like 15 minutes, and then it was like, well, how did that actually work?
So the way that I do it and seems to be reliable is I actually just go to plus.google.com first, like just go to Google Plus's page, and you can switch there between accounts, and it's pretty obvious there. And then kind of once you navigate from there, it kind of hangs around. That's what I've found, anyways.
Okay, now if that's because I've been like going to Google, search, bring up Google Plus, searching on Node.js, clicking on him, then if you collect the right ways, it sticks. If it didn't, it didn't. But so if you just say you go to plus.google.com and select it, let me.
Yeah, there's an option to select the user. It's in the upper right last time I looked. And then I click on, oh, that's true. I do only click on things in the UI. I never manually enter any URLs or bookmarks or anything like that. And I think that's necessary to make the
Yeah,
user.
the funny thing is well, I just went to plus.google.com, and yeah, okay, actually maybe that there's a delay too, because first it just showed me my account only. Now it shows me the Node.js one. But then
Yeah.
I think you're right. You have to be careful what you clicked. Like if you just, I think what I found probably what you do is under the drop down, if you then just go to Hangouts underneath there, it sticks.
Yeah. That's what I do is I go to the drop down on the upper left, then you have Home and Hangouts on Air tab, then I click Hangouts on Air, and then
Yeah.
that's what works.
Yeah, I think that sounds like what I end up doing. So that's
Okay.
Yeah, and I think our current tutorial on how to do this is out of date with regards to Google's UI. I think they've moved some stuff around.
Okay, so the link in the chat, if somebody wants to take that, and it's just a wiki, just edit it and bring it up to date and put the Node user stuff in there, that might be good. Good
also,
resource.
I want to mention there's TSC issue 48, Preferred Meeting Tools, that has info about using Uber Conference. It's still open, I believe. Yes. So if something's updated, maybe close this and refer over to it.
No, I don't think that issue's been closed. I mean, we prefer not to use Uber Conference, but anyways, we should move on.
Also, I was going to add for stand-up, I've shared the calendar I've been using to keep track of all the meetings with Josh, and Josh has been adding a few things on there. It's just a personal calendar of mine. So we're collaborating and making those available.
Wasn't there
a little progress on that one?
A calendar?
There was an IOJS calendar back in the day.
Okay, we need an official Node.js calendar. I'd been meaning to do that for a long time, but never got around to it. Also, so that we can have the bot like automatically create meetings from it, meeting issues.
Yeah.
But there needs to be a calendar
that issue
first. I don't know how to set one up though, so if you do, that's fantastic.
Yeah, so we've Josh and I have been talking back and forth on that TSC issue about the meeting calendar. So be great if there was an official calendar.
Yeah, I think a calendar would be really useful too. We do want to make sure that whatever we pick is a technology or tool that works kind of like cross ecosystem. A lot of people use Google, but not everyone does. So it'd be nice if we could find something that would also work in the Microsoft ecosystem, and I think Yahoo's got one too.
Okay, well, if you know of something that's more cross-platform than Google Calendar currently is, please let us know.
Yeah, and there may not be, but it I think is worthwhile to at least investigate.
Okay, let's move on. Good discussion though. Okay, so let's do this defining node core thing. Michael, do you want to tell us about where we're up to with that?
Yeah, so
we
there
can
were only
progress.
really minor comments since the last time we discussed it. A few tweaks that were suggested by. Let me actually go to the issue so I don't get that wrong. Where are we? Give me one sec. Okay, one more. Come on. Sorry, wrong one. Give me one more sec. TSC.
I think I copied it in the chat.
Okay, yeah. On there, so basically there was a few comments by Nebrius, and just tightening up the language a little bit. I think the one of them was around, I'd said, code and doc, making sure that it was more general, so we weren't excluding anything from in terms of what we had to scope over in the repositories. And the other comment was around in terms of the processes, making it so that it was again more general, so not limiting it necessarily to the repositories, but also to like the other internet related real estate that we have. So it was two minor tweaks to the wording around those things. Otherwise, we haven't had any other comments.
Yeah, with those comments, I was mostly just kind of worried that there might be some rules lawyering around it that could crop up when the intention was to be a little broader.
Yeah, I think they're both good. I pushed a commit and pulled them in basically exactly what you suggested.
I think it's starting to look good. A couple of questions. One is a clarification. First bullet point says change it to the context of any repositories under GitHub/Node.js. So that means that nothing can be moved to that organization without being approved for being part under the TSC umbrella, correct?
That line is meant to say if there's existing projects,
Okay,
the TSC
so
has scope over anything that's within those projects.
so then you mean as of a given date?
Well, once it's in, like we shouldn't, basically that in conjunction with the other lines basically are saying, once we have projects that are in, we're free to control anything that goes in and out of them. But if we're going to move an existing project in or create a new project, those are times where we may consult with the board.
Okay, and once we moved in, then we definitely have authority, right?
Exactly. Then we have the scope over the technical, then we have the authority over those projects.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense. I think it's a default interpretation of this line, but I could also have it interpreted as like repositories that are current under GitHub Node.js, because it doesn't say what happens when you move one.
Yeah, I guess that's true. If you read all of the lines, I think it becomes a little more clear in terms of like later down it talks about adding or removing. But I don't know, do you think it's useful to say existing in that line?
Well, unless anybody else sees the same issue. I mean, at first I had to think about it, and then I thought, okay, this is the most likely interpretation of it. I think it's probably fine. The other question I have is, this doesn't mention anything about repos in other orgs, right?
Yes. Do we have any other orgs?
Well, the one that could come to mind is libuv.
Right. So
Yeah,
I don't
we want to
know.
make sure libuv is in scope here.
Sorry, Rod, I didn't quite catch that.
So we want to make sure that libuv is in scope here.
Okay. So even like we're not necessarily going to move it under Node.js.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I don't think so.
So I mean, is it as simple as adding? You know, we've said under GitHub Node.js we can add in and GitHub libuv. Is that a simple solution?
Probably.
Yeah, I haven't checked what else is under the libuv org.
Nothing, I think.
Release tool, the website, enhancement proposal, API documentation, and extra utilities. Sounds like.
Oh,
Yeah,
right, it has
all
its
of
own EPs, repo, and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, it's all related to the libuv project, so I think the whole org right now would fit.
Hey, I was hoping to get some clarification on the action item here. So issue number 84 was created by Rod after a board meeting where they had asked that the TSC defines Node core. I did a little sanity checking with a few people in the community to see if I was losing my mind. So when I hear Node core, I think CTC, and that was some confusion. And there's language out there that says, Node core is managed by CTC. This has now, through a few different iterations, has turned into a TSC scope markdown document, which then seems like conflicting with the TSC charter, which has a scope section. So I'm just unsure if which we're defining, if we're defining TSC scope or what Node core is.
A bit of both. We're actually trying to step back from what we have already defined. One of the problems we have is that partway through the evolution of our documentation and our structure, this concept of the umbrella program was brought in, which was originally conceived as a way to bring in lots of other projects that weren't related to Node core. And that's partly why the TSC even exists as a separate group from the CTC, just to be able to manage extra stuff. But it became apparent that there was very little appetite within our group to actually pursue that. And also the board reacted a bit negatively to that idea. They wanted us to be much more concerned about Node core. So this question of autonomy came up. What does, we're given autonomy over technical decisions, but exactly what scope does that fall? What is the scope of that autonomy is left undefined. So this is partly about doing that. And one of the get to here was getting the board to accept the mission statement that we worked on that is still floating around. That has not been accepted, and one of the main blockers there is that it says that we are concerned about Node core, and they said that we don't have a clear definition of Node core. So that was one of the main things that I was trying to get to with this this whole activity here. And I think that Sorry.
No, I just was gonna say, like, there seem to be sometimes things that come up in CTC, which the CTC is perhaps less interested in, like, but I don't know, like patents kind of stuff or NPM, and is that the kind of stuff that like people that want to handle that can come through the TSC, or does that, in other words, so the TSC and CTC be complementary bodies working on similar things, just with the one is more of a project management focus and one is the core developers?
Yeah, so the original way that the split was framed when we first had the discussion about it was actually simply about having two separate meetings, not two separate bodies. It was about having an organizational, administrative focused meeting and a technical focused meeting. That's how we originally started doing this. And then when this umbrella thing came up, it was decided to split the groups in half. And I actually, and I keep on saying this across GitHub, but I think we're in this really awkward limbo where we don't have a clear picture as to why we even have the split and who goes in what and what work gets done where falls. And this is a constant source of problems. When I'm dealing with the board and then having to try and get people involved from the technical side, where do I reach out to? And it depends on how technical the question is sometimes, but also who's a member of what. And like I said in the issue for today, there's extra people on the CTC who are not here, who I actually think could be really valuable for the kind of work that we do here, but they don't have membership because we created a separate group and we haven't figured out why we exist. So there's two things here. One of them is that I want to get the board to accept a mission statement that is clear and that says what we're doing, why we even exist. We don't have that, and we need that. And one step to doing that is to give them a thing on a platter that says, here's what Node Core means, and what we think that means. And so when the mission statement refers to Node Core, you can look at this. And then the other step is actually saying, why does this, how does this structure work that we have, where we have this autonomy over the technical stuff, and we do this technical activity. How does that actually work? The way that the PR has emerged, that Michael's done it, is more about purely about the autonomy bit, that we have autonomy over this area, but I still would like it to be usable as this is what Node Core is. So yeah, it's a little bit mixed up, but there's a couple of broad goals there.
I mean, and I think in terms of the mission statement, that's more what the board was concerned about, is like what you're going to be doing versus the technical, like whether this technical piece or that technical piece is part of it, right?
Yeah, a bit of both. I did have a discussion at the board about I wanted to get them to accept that there is only one TSC for the foundation, because the bylaws are kind of messy, and they do have this little clause in there that allows the board to spin up an alternative TSC or multiple TSCs to manage multiple technical things. So I wanted to get an assertion from the board that was not how we're going to operate. Unfortunately, being a board, they want to leave their options open, and so it's like, that's how we do it now, but don't want to rule things out. So that's a little bit in limbo too. But part of that discussion was we need to define our scope so that they have more confidence in us and the way we execute. Like, we really need to build that confidence with the board to say, right, we've got autonomy here, and we exercise this technical stuff, and we do it well. We have a clear idea of what we're doing, where we're going, and we can be trusted when expansion is required. And one example of that is NPM, which came up in some discussions. Those discussions have backed off, but there was a suggestion at one stage that NPM would come under a separate TSC and be managed differently. I don't think anyone has the stomach for that at the moment, but that was an alternative. That was an idea which was looked at, which I wanted to squash and make sure that the board is an area of technical execution. Having that mission statement in achieving that, because we take care of that first point in the mission statement. Yeah.
Would it be, should we change the doc to say Node core instead of TSC scope, to Michael's point?
I was more, yeah, you mean in the mission statement. Sorry, I forget. Never mind.
I'm just saying,
yeah,
is what like TSC scope, but Rod is saying really, whether it's TSC, CTC, whatever, we're defining the whole project.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. This is the scope of Node core, and then it could say the same thing in there, which is that this is the TSC has autonomy to act in this area, but this is what Node core means.
Yeah,
I think the reason why we talk about in terms of Node cores, so that in terms of the TSC, is because the TSC is the thing that's written in the foundation charters.
I also find as soon as we say Node core, it really seems that people jump to trying to define, like, that means libuv, v8, and I don't know that that's not what's in this. It's tried to stay out of that discussion, because I think that's a hard discussion as to where you draw the line, right? I don't mind changing the terminology, except that I think it might cause confusion and more discussion.
Yeah, I also feel like node core is a very colloquial term, one that everyone sort of thinks they have this definition of, but isn't. Well, it's not defined anywhere, of course, but it also is something that's evolved out of just kind of like more technical discussions in the history of the project. So maybe we need to come up with a third term, because we're not really defining TSC scope, but node core is maybe not the right words either. Maybe something like node project scope or something like that.
I agree with that.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good to me too.
Okay, so if you go back to pull request number 77 statement, like, I'm happy to revisit that. So the main thing we're trying to address here is the first point in that, which says the goal of the foundation is achieved by, first point, maintaining the health of the core Node.js project. So that's what it says in there. We can revisit that, and because it's still in limbo, if you think there's a better way of defining that, the other was to divide it into these three areas. There was Node core, then there's the wider Node.js open source ecosystem. So the stuff we think about mainly on GitHub that's related to Node, and all the breadth of that. And then there's the commercial ecosystem beyond that, where companies are building products and tools and services based on Node. So there was three areas of activity, and in my presentation of the board, the TSC got autonomy over and ownership over that first point. The second point was owned jointly by the TSC and the the foundation executive, so that's Michael's group. And then it's much more about the executive and even the board getting involved in that, but that's a bit beyond our scope. So have a look at that and use that as a reference point. Really, what we want to do is get this adopted by the board. And their main concern was, and the reason they had this concern, the concern about the scope of Node core, the reason they had this concern is because they were spooked when we said Express could come under the foundation, or at least under the incubator thing. They looked at that and, well, hang on, this was a surprise to us. We didn't hear about this going on, and we're not sure this is right, because we're not sure this is what we signed up for the foundation. So even though we had autonomy to do that kind of thing, they were then questioning, well, hang on, is that within the scope of the autonomy that you really should have? And I do agree with them that those kinds of decisions should have triggered a discussion with the board. Express is beyond what we really started out doing, and we should have had that discussion and got that okay. So yeah, try and merge those thoughts together.
So if a project that is not currently part of core or this list that Michael put in his PR were to come under the scope of the TSC, then how will we change this PR 77? This is that the technical team independently manages execution strategy for maintaining the health of the core Node.js project. Will we add a line there, or do we want to use another definition like core Node.js properties or something like this?
Some of that stuff below so actually the section that says foundation mission statement, that's the main bit that we want to focus on. The additional explainer bits, that would just like to give a framework to get that accepted. So I don't know if it's worth diving too much into the rest of that detail, but I mean, I can try and present that to the board again, but they didn't bite very hard on some of the extra detail that I provided there. They were more interested in.
I was just gonna say maybe we could combine your original stuff, Rod, with what Michael did, and kind of say the CTC TSC has basically the GitHub organization, and everything that happens there is under our control. Like, does that make any sense?
Well, so the foundation mission statement, I don't want to get into the mechanics of TSC autonomy. That's not part of the mission statement. The mission statement, like what we were trying to achieve there was simply have a mission for the foundation. What the hell are we doing here? What are we trying to achieve together? That's it. And it got mixed up in TSC autonomy and scope just because of the stuff that had happened. So getting that ticked off, but like let's get the board happy with what that means, and then we can move forward with this foundation, the mission statement. Because their worry is they read that first bit and they think that we're asking for this vague node core thing that we want to. That's very vague to them.
Yes, but the second part of your PR foundation structure then goes into competency of different arms of the foundation, right? What the board has authority over, what the executive has authority over. So that's where it gets tricky.
Yeah, and like even though this makes sense to me, and I think it works really well, I just didn't get the buy-in from the board on any stuff. Mainly because they got hung up on that first stuff there. That was hard going, getting them to accept the clarity of that stuff.
Can this be broken down a bit and they can accept parts of it to just get a little progress?
Absolutely. I really want them to just accept that foundation mission statement. The rest of it is just stuff to support that.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Removing foundation structure from the initial PR. We can get buy-in on the first part.
And for what it's worth, this PR was never meant to land. It was simply discussion PR for to get people to agree on the way forward when I was taking this to the board, so it wasn't intended to land as is.
So just to clarify though, there's no proposal to change the TSC charter in any way currently.
Not yet. I think the way I see it in my head, and I've been trying to express, is that the first step is to get the foundation to agree to a mission. So that once we understand what we're doing, then we can come back and reflect on what we're doing as part of that mission, and then say, does it make sense, the structure that we have? Because I don't think it does. And then how do we better organize ourselves so that we are executing on that mission, so that the health of the Node core project is being taken care of by our activity. And it may be that we merge those groups back together again and have just one TSC that have different arms of it that do different things. Or it may be that we keep this structure and just have a clarity about who owns what the relationship is, and what we pass off between each other. But we don't have that now. So that's what we need to get to. But I think the first step is that mission statement. Maybe we never get there. Maybe the board just is, because this is a possibility. The board is just not. It's not a strongly opinionated board in that it wants to drive something forward. It's much more of an administrative board where it sort of exists to make the foundation exist, and that's about it. So we may never get to this mission statement, and maybe we just say, this is our personal mission statement for what we do. Maybe that's okay. But the step beyond doing this activity is to figure out our organizational structure, because it's not working.
Yeah, I just want to add, I very much agree with that approach, because we really don't know where we're heading in a lot of this. So trying to plan out exactly where we're going to end up, I think, is too difficult right now. So it's, I think, important just to focus on getting to the next step and taking things one step at a time, and then seeing where we end up.
Yeah, and actually, this is another point that is worth reiterating. Somebody made it. I can't remember who, but Node, the foundation has been winning by default. We've won because things have fallen into place. We're not doing really well because we are intentionally doing really well. A lot of our success has come from just things falling into place, and so we had a discussion previously about strategy, and a lot of this document. That PR is about strategy, for this very reason, that we don't have strategy. We have tactics, the way we execute things, but there's no sense of looking forward, looking ahead, and mapping out where the path is and how we can succeed, because we don't know what we're actually trying to succeed on. So having the clarity about what the goal is, what the mission is, then we can start being much more strategic about that. And saying, this is what we're doing. Let's make ourselves win at this thing intentionally.
So I brought this up before. I'll bring it up now that I'm talking. And when I look at Node, I think this is the framework, this is the platform that brings JavaScript out of the browser. And the evolution, the move from Joyent to the foundation, I kind of feel like all of that is okay. That's Node Foundation is the foundation that handles or that represents that server-side JavaScript, and continuing things like getting Chakra in, or making sure this this JavaScript can run on Android or AIX or wherever it needs to run, kind of comes to us. And maybe that's too big of a scope, and it would scare people.
Just quickly, time check. If we want to discuss the other things still, we have 10 minutes left.
I actually think this is the most valuable discussion we could be having now. The other thing that we had on the agenda was really just the roll-up stuff, which I'm a little bit hesitant. Partly I haven't done it because I've just been busy, but partly I'm hesitant because I'm concerned that we're putting more load on people who are busy already. So I don't feel that's a huge priority right now. The biggest priority is get this stuff sorted.
I agree. Josh, did you still know what you were gonna say? Sorry about that.
The same thing. Basically, like we're back-end JavaScript in some ways, or is that like would some of the is that too broad? I guess I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. Kind of what your thoughts are. I don't know. Just sharing that.
I think it gets complicated. I think some people would view that as too broad. Others would view it as too narrow. Because Node is used for not back-end things at time, but Node is also not used for all back-end things. And there are, technically at least, there are other back-end JavaScript runtimes that no one really uses.
Also, it gets pretty weird because Brave is a web browser, and there's like Node.js running in it. Yeah.
Yeah, fair. I hear that.
I do like that sentiment, Josh. That we should own backend server-side JavaScript. Actually, we've been asserting that in Node source for a while as well. That's what Node is about. But it is for the board's tastes, I think, because you could fit all sorts of stuff in that, like Express, like pretty much anything in the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Also, just keep in mind that like
And
backend doesn't necessarily mean server side, right? Like front end JavaScript pretty much means that you are live loading and live running someone else's code that's hosted on a server. Node.js, virtually always you're running code that you have, installed in some other way before just clicking a link on your local machine, that sort of thing.
Plus, there are a bunch of CLI tools built in Node that don't necessarily fall on the server side.
I shouldn't have used the word server side. I could have just said non-browser.
I guess
I was afraid that would be really wrong.
The other aspect is our goals don't have to be limited to what the scope of the autonomy for the TSC is.
Yeah, exactly. Like Express could come like if somebody could ask us, should we take an Express? That makes sense. They should ask us. We could say no.
Right. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Like our goals could be to own, back-end JavaScript or whatever we say the right thing is. But that doesn't mean that that's the same as the autonomy of the TSC. So, the board might agree with, well, this is the scope of what we should be trying to accomplish. But when it comes to these things like adding Express, the board should be consulted, right?
Yeah, the big thing is we're just trying to define like what we have autonomy over. We can ask the board for other things when necessary.
Yeah, so if we say our goal is X, but that in executing X, here's where we're autonomous, and otherwise we'll consult with the board, that's hopefully would address the concerns.
If we define, we might use the term node project, but it's to advance JavaScript outside of the browser. That's the definition of the node project. What the TSC is responsible for is the node runtime, the stuff that's in the GitHub repo and libuv. And anything beyond that, anything that falls between like node core and the repos and that Express and all the other things which are part of it, but not in those repos, that would be, it's under the node foundation. It's part of our mission, but it's not the TSC and the CTC. It's something that would have to go through the board too.
That doesn't quite work because we need to also deal with like build resources and stuff like Node.js. It gets pretty
Okay, well
awkward.
that's and all that like falls under TSC, the definition Michael
But
gave.
that's where it's like everything underneath the foundation projects, right? And it's the, you know, our goal maybe to do all this great stuff, and it turns out that we want to bring Express into that, then we would consult before that basically scope of, you know, we'd be bringing in another big piece which we would be autonomous over once it comes in, but the bringing it in part would be the consultation part.
Yeah, we said that the list approach is easy to scope this. So I was thinking maybe we should give a name to that list that we can refer to out of the TSC scope and call it Node.js core properties. And in theory, if we wanted to add Express to that list, then we could say that TSC as authority over the Node.js core properties. Then when we add Express, we go to the foundational review and approval, and then we will just add it to the list, and it would fall under the TSC.
Yeah,
Well, as long
okay.
as we can meet the needs of the mission statement thing project. So that's we've got to make sure we get that as well, unless we reword that in the mission statement.
Right, if the mission statement said the node core properties, where properties means more like land than, if the mission statement said that does start to sound like it's close.
When you read that though as a mission statement, does it make sense?
Well, you link to the properties definition, right? And it's a list.
The only thing, the first thing popped into my mind with properties was, you know, not land type properties, but, you know, attributes of something as opposed to, I don't know if it's still quite the right word. The node core projects? Because everything underneath Node.js is in fact the project, right?
Well, here's the other thing. I don't think we need to get too hung up on connecting TSC scope and node core definition, because we may be given responsibility things that are well outside node core, and maybe Express remains. Maybe we all agree that Express is something that the foundation looks after. We don't want to have to munge that into node core, but we do want to have a way to say that the TSC is responsible for that. And so the mission statement doesn't have to say what the TSC is responsible for. It just has to give us a framework within which to frame that. So we're responsible for the node core stuff, but we're also jointly responsible for the ecosystem, the open source ecosystem. And perhaps that responsibility does mean taking ownership of some of that ecosystem and managing it ourselves.
And
let's not try and get too elegant.
So the TSC charter broadly defines that there are core projects, plural, and I believe that's where the node core terminology came from, as it is a core project. And so there is flexibility from what I read there to have multiple core projects.
I don't think the terminology came from that. The terminology is something that's generally used around a bunch of open source projects, but isn't like super defined anywhere. Like you have the same thing for like, you know, Rust, like lots of languages and stuff. We refer to like sort of like the platforms, the runtimes, it's like the core. It's broader than just us, but it's still like it's not really defined anywhere specifically.
Well, it is called out in the charter, but
what's in the charter?
Something that I
core projects.
Do you mean the TSC charter or the foundation charter?
TSC charter.
Yeah, I think that was something we pulled in, but that was pulled in later on. That was not originally there. So
Hey
we might
guys,
not
can you hear
actually
me?
have permission per se to actually have that language in our charter. Sorry, in our documents.
Okay. Yeah, the core is not defined in any of the other governing documents.
Which is our big problem that we're trying to solve. So
Yeah, I do kind of view these efforts as sort of looking at these existing charters and saying, where do we need to tweak them and update them? So, I don't think we should be completely beholden to the charters. I think this is the time where we look at them and change them if need be. Like, if the definition of core projects in the charter doesn't make sense, then, we want to make sure we get that changed and make sure that that's where we actually want to be.
Hey, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Before I was like, so I just want to mention one thing that I have learned from this call, which I didn't think about before, is that the scope of the Node project could be broader than the scope of the TSC and CTC. Like the board was kind of pushing us, hey, don't be too broad, but like the Node Foundation and the project can be more than the TSC is. They don't necessarily have to be the same.
I think, Rod, isn't that one of the things you're trying to avoid to some extent?
yeah, and that's within the, as I said, it's within the language of the bylaws that they can spin up new TSCs to do more technical activity. So, and I was trying to avoid that simply because we've built this foundation with very strong ideas, and we're executing. And I was concerned that we would dilute them by having alternative technical execution under the foundation, and then there's also the dilution and juggling for resources from multiple technical groups.
So then maybe we should, in other words, we don't have to, so you're concerned if we leave an empty space, then it could be filled in with other TSCs and dilute and stuff. Maybe we should say, hey, there is this empty space, and emphasize that that space should be managed by just the one TSC with the board. In other words, maybe we don't have to avoid the
I don't really want to get to that discussion right now with the board because I think we'll get hung up on it, because the board, like every political body, wants to leave its options open so that its own scope is protected. We're going through this exercise of limiting our own scope, which I think is healthy. But the board's not about to limit its own scope. So that's a challenge for the board that we can come back to, but let's not mix it up in this. Otherwise, it'll be the thing that we get stuck on.
Also, just another word. People like if we leave like obvious like holes, they're gonna end up filled one way or another.
We should end this up. I've got to get onto another call. So do you, Jeremiah. But this has been good. I feel like we're getting a bit more in sync on what the objectives are here. And hopefully, those of us that have time can add some more value. So thanks for the discussion. Let's take it back to GitHub and then revisit in a couple of weeks. So let's end the formal part of the meeting now. Just got some private business to cover. The outstanding question actually I had was when the next meeting is going to be, because I believe the next meeting slot overlaps with Node Summit, which a bunch of us are going to be at.
Can maybe push it another week then. Let's figure that out on the issue.
Okay.
Yeah, the next week is Cascadia Fest, which I know at least Brian will be there.
Yeah, and I think a few other people might be, but I'm not really sure. We can take it to GitHub though, and we might be able to find some creative solution to this.
Okay. Great. Okay. Well, let's wrap up the meeting now.
Right.
Sorry if there's no QA. Is there anyone actually listening to the live stream?
It's like there's one person right now apparently. That might be
Okay,
me,
apologies.
to be honest. I don't think so, but
Okay, apologies if there's one person there and they have questions because we have to wrap it up. So thanks everyone.
thanks.
Call